Hello, everyone. Welcome into another BDPA Tech and Career Talk. I am your Tech and Career Talk leader, Devin Jenkins. Based here in Charlotte, North Carolina, serve as a commercial success manager for IT within US and Canada for GE Healthcare, supporting digital marketing and a few other initiatives on the e-commerce side of the house. I'm also the founder and CEO of Share the Vibes LLC. So glad to have you all with us. I'm excited for today's conversation. We're always glad to be partnering with our friends over at Vanguard Consulting Group. They always bring in some unique speakers on engaging topics, and it's insightful for everyone. So you're guaranteed to get something out of it in one way, form, or fashion. So I'm always glad to have you with us. Before I get out of the way and turn the floor over to our special guest today, I just want to give a quick overview of BDPA and the Tech and Career Talks for those who may not be as familiar. But BDPA is Black Data Processing Associates. The organization was founded in 1975 as a means for developing the African American talent pipeline within the technology sector. We have a focus on youth, especially middle and high school students, teaching them computer programming skills, technology skills in general, professional development, preparing them for careers in the IT field. But we also continue to be a forum for networking and career development for professionals who are in the industry. Our mantra is advancing careers from the classroom to the boardroom. Tech and Career Talks take place on the second and fourth Friday of each month. We have a range of speakers and a range of topics. Some are more technology focused and hard skill related. Some are more career focused and built around soft skills. So we have something for everyone, no matter where you're at in your career, whether you're a student or retired. We have something for everyone that you can get some value out of. So continue to join the talks, share these with a friend. This will be recorded and available on our YouTube channel, National BDPA, afterwards, and also it'll be on our Tech and Career Talk website, which is bdpa.org/tech and career talks. So I'll share that link at the end. Last thing before I turn the floor over, we want to encourage you to go to conference.bdpa.org and make sure you register and plan to attend this year's BDPA Con 24. We'll be back at the Westin Peachtree Plaza in Atlanta, Georgia, gearing up for some exciting speakers and topics and a few surprises that you may not be expecting. So be on the lookout for more details around that. But go to conference.bdpa.org. Make sure you register for this year's conference. We're excited to see you in Atlanta, July 31st through August 3rd. So get ready, get ready. All right, that's what I have. I'm going to get out of the way and turn the floor over to our friends at Vanguard Consulting Group. So, Akil, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Devin. Thank you, BDPA. We have had such a great relationship for about almost 3 or 4 years at this point, starting just around apprenticeship, but it's grown outside of apprenticeship into workforce development and tech and other areas. And we've had the opportunity to, on a quarterly basis, have this platform to bring our network and our friends and our guests in to have some conversations, and we're doing it again today. So thank you guys for joining, and thank you for the other folks that will be replaying this in the future. I can't say how excited I am about our guest today. We've known each other, I won't say how long, because then we'll start to put our ages out there, but I wasn't as gray then as I am now. But I'm thoroughly excited to kick off this really dynamic conversation with my esteemed friend and scholar leader, Dr. Safiya Noble. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. It has been a long time. I'm so excited to be here today.
Right on. So just to let everybody know a little bit, I do my Steve Harvey thing and have do the whole layout. So I just want to let people know that Dr. Noble is known for her genius, ingenuity, digital justice, social justice activism, and for her what I like to call "let's talk more" revolutionary action stance as it pertains to women and underserved and underrepresented communities, especially us Black and Brown communities across the world. And so it's dope to have her here. Couple little housekeeping things before we jump into the conversation. One of them is that we want you guys to participate. We want this to be as engaging as possible. So please utilize the chat function. My teammate, Amara Tennessee, will be monitoring the chat function. And if you have questions She will kind of tap in and interrupt us and ask those questions on the spot. Unless we got a good flow, then she'll find a way to fit it in. But we will also have some Q&A at the end of the conversation if you have any other questions or comments, or want to engage, and then we'll close it up in about an hour. So any housekeeping for you, Dr. Noble?
No,
And I know you don't want me, you're gonna
you
kick
gotta
me
call me
in,
Safiya.
yeah, for keeping us. So I'll start using Safiya from now on throughout the rest of this conversation. So all right, so let's jump into it. I did a little bit of introduction just for my fandom of you for so long, and being such good friends. But you want to introduce yourself and say what you're up to and what you're doing these days.
Sure. Well, first I want to say that I'm joining you this morning from Los Angeles, but better known as the Tonga People's Land that has not been ceded where I live as a guest, and I'm really honored to get to be a part of a BDPA conversation. As we were warming up here, I was looking on my bookshelf for this book, but also another book. Some of you might be familiar with this book, Black Software by Charlton McElwain. And I was looking for this other book by Anna Everett called Digital Diaspora, both of which are really important books that have paid incredible homage to BDPA and that have counter narrated in Silicon Valley the real history of Black people at the heart and epicenter of kind of the digital technological revolution. So I'm part of a community of scholars who study race and technology, but also Black people's contributions to technology, and BDPA has really been the epicenter in our community for, since 1979, but really, I would say even before the organization formally organized, there were so many important people who have given us and have who've given us the technologies we have, but also who have tried to resist some of the worst things as well that we have. So I just wanted to let you know that I know where I am and how honored I am to be here. This is the first time we've really been able to connect. I'm a professor at UCLA. I am the David O. Sears Presidential Endowed Chair of Social Science, which is basically a fancy way of saying I work really hard. I work my face off on these issues, and have for about 15 years. I have been a researcher studying well, I say now just like the dark side of the internet, but because people kind of understand that. But I really have put my stake in the ground around algorithmic discrimination, racist and sexist algorithmic harm that comes from large scale digital media platforms. I wrote a book called Algorithms of Oppression that is really about search engines and the future of Black people inside those kinds of systems, how we're misrepresented, how we're under attack, in fact, in many ways, and how those kinds of technologies facilitate harm against our communities, and how all of those harms are really invisibilized in a way that seem natural and normal rather than coded and designed and deployed for maximal profit. And many times, as we all know in this call, racism and sexism are some of the most profitable businesses on planet Earth that there is. So in that way, I try to surface the way in which those things are enacted, those hierarchies and those power systems work in a variety of different kinds of projects that come out of Silicon Valley. So that's the headline on me, and just a grounding for myself on how I'm entering this conversation with you today.
It's lovely to and I obviously I'm well aware of all those things, but I love that you started out with the foundation that you have, that you've studied or you've seen things going on with BDPA. And the reason why I'm saying this is because when I was introduced to BDPA And this is, like I said, 3 or 4 years ago. And I think that I was introduced by our friend Ebony Haynes, Dr. Ebony Haynes, who's on the call. But we fostered this relationship, and every single year and everywhere we go, I'm talking about BDPA. In any tech circle that I'm in, I'm talking about BDPA, and I'm always very surprised that people still don't know that the organization, or at least in certain circles, that the organization doesn't exist. And so we're very I'm very excited to hear that that it's mentioned in those books, and that we have and that there's some presence there, and that it's growing. It's obviously a national organization. They've done amazing work, and so we're excited for that. I you mentioned a lot of things that you do and work on. So I named, while you were talking, at least 4 or 5 hats in your
Yeah.
career, from being a professor to directing multiple initiatives to
Yep.
juggling all these roles. So what's the superpower that you have that enables you to kind of balance and manage all of this craziness, and then have have your family and your children and all that good stuff that we all have to do as well. But how do you do it?
Well, I think I have had a lot of failures in my life, and personal and professional. And I think that so many people especially in this country, are oriented to thinking about failure as the end. I do believe that failure is more like the beginning, or the seed of the failure is, there's a seed of growth and something more amazing that can come from those things. I finally learned at one point in my life that it's important to work in the flow. And when you work in the flow, and I'll say a little bit about what I mean by that, but when you work in the flow, you can do a lot. You actually
Yeah,
can do a lot of things because they're kind of easy.
yeah,
And so when I was younger in my career, I will just say that in my personal life, I was one of those kinds of people who would try to go toward the thing that was really hard, and I would there'd be like metaphorical, barbed wire at the top of that
right.
fence I was trying to climb, or I'd try to swim through a moat of lava, that
Of
I had to
course.
cross to get to a thing, or an experience or people. And uh, one day I kind of finally, or I guess after like many years of that, I realized, oh, maybe the moat of lava, or the barbed wire, is to keep me out or away. It's like protection to keep me from people and situations and jobs that I don't need to be near, that aren't good for me, that are not on my path, on the not for me.
Right.
And when I kind of shifted my worldview in that way, that completely changed my life. And it's, I think, really allowed me for at least the last decade of my life to, or more, to uh, see where it's easy, be very attuned on a daily basis to where there's uh, things that aren't for me. What happens then too is that I'm also more available to good partners, to good people, to people who where it's simpatico, where we can get a lot done, and we actually do. Then so I run a small center. We have 5 women, the Center on Race and Digital Justice, and everybody's high powered. And, so we like to think of ourselves as being high quality and high touch. And we don't need to be massive. We don't want to grow to be a staff of 100, because that's too much to keep up after. We don't really want to be focused on operations and making an organization work. We want to be focused on touching work, legislation at the federal level, at the municipal level, working with people, trying to understand all the places where AI and algorithmic decision-making systems need to be monitored, or we need to be regulating, or we need to be educating people about these kinds of things. And we can do that when we stay agile. So that's like my best career advice for anyone, is if it's really, really hard somewhere, it might be that there's an obstacle in the way that is protecting you from going
Yeah.
down the path you don't need to go down, and find the the paths of least resistance where you can have the bigger impact.
Yeah, I share obviously some of that. We came up together, so I share some of that. Everything has to be hard. All lessons have to be hard. And so I learned along that same journey for a lot, and probably still a lot now. Unfortunately, still learning some of that.
We're so
But
Gen
one
X.
thing yeah, but the one thing that I would say, just as also as a takeaway, is what you spoke about with collaboration. You talked about the 5 women that you have as part of the organization, and they're all high powered and super capable at what they do.
Yes.
I just learned, very late in the game that collaboration is the key. And so about our 1890 collective, and about some, you're with us on that kind of stuff. So just sitting back sometimes from my perspective and seeing the women that I work with and the partners that I've network I've kind of put together to fit in the pieces of the puzzle, the life work balance is amazing. And
Yeah.
the stress level, but in the same breath, the productivity is also crazy. So yeah, that's if you guys haven't written that down, those notes, or you make sure you watch this recording again, because that was some real game you just got right there.
Yeah, I
So
love that. I mean, I think Black people, we have, of course, we have been through so many hard things through the
yeah,
generations,
yeah,
really, really obviously treacherous things, and those things continue. And um, if we work on these really treacherous, difficult things, which for me, working on for 15 years, like the most malicious, dangerous, harmful, pornographic,
yeah,
damaging types of ways these companies engage with Black people, it's very depressing work, as you can
yeah,
imagine. I mean, it's
yeah,
debilitating and at times. And so, and I've watched people that I love very much in academia study difficult things and internalize the pain of those things, and their health be absolutely destroyed. I'm not sure, if people realize that Black women in academia, are dropping, dying in their late 50s, in their early 60s. I mean, this is not in this moment, uh, no one should be dying in their 50s with the kinds
right,
of healthcare and knowledge that we have about, taking care of ourselves. So we know that, I know I work in a profession that destroys Black women. And I think that that is all the more reason that we need to collaborate, exactly as you said, and find partners and find our people that we laugh with while we're doing the work, that we can roll our eyes with while we do the work, that we can cry with, and feel fulfilled with those people, that we are living a meaningful life and that the work that we're doing matters. And that is really, really important. And I think that as we do that in our careers, we go farther together, that African proverb. And
that's right,
I really believe in that.
yeah. I want to get in a little bit into algorithms of oppression,
So
and I promote the book like I'm a salesman.
thank you.
All the time. Everybody that knows me knows I'm like. Matter of fact, it's so funny because my daughter was writing a paper last night for her final, and I was like, "Oh, you need to go get Safiya's book off my shelf and put." So there's some quotes in her University of San Francisco paper that just got turned in today that has your touch on it. But anyway, so in writing, your interest in starting to write that, was there like a particular aha moment or something that just like, oh my gosh, I have to tackle this, or I have to dive into this particular fight? Was there something
Yeah.
that led you to uncover hidden biases in search engines, or how did that come about?
Yeah, that's so interesting. There's kind of three big ahas. First, I came out of industry. I'd worked in industry for, I don't know, 12 years or something in the Bay Area. I had lived through the first Silicon Valley.com boom
Mhm.
and bust. I'd lived through two of them. And I was very attuned to things like gentrification, racism in Silicon Valley, like sexism. Like I really, because I lived in Oakland,
That's right.
for so long. And then when I worked in corporate, I worked for a big telecommunications company that was at the forefront of putting like community technology centers into low income housing and into East Palo Alto. And so I was the person in charge of those things. And so I also really understood things like the digital divide and what was as like people were coming online. And as I was leaving the ad industry, I we were hiring programmers to come in and do basically what was the early search engine optimization cottage industry. This was before we even called it SEO, but there were people who were coming in and helping us figure out how to do our media buying and media placements in Yahoo and I mean, just so dating myself, right? But in these old search engines and even the early days of Google. And, we knew we were trying to game the systems to get our clients' content to the front page. So I had those things that were in me as the recession was hitting. I moved to Illinois. I got married, and I went back to grad school at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, which many people on this call probably know is a big STEM school. It's a big STEM university. It's top 5 computer science department. I worked as a development director for the computer science department, and I was working with all these professors. There were no Black professors there, and the way they talked about technology was so different than, of course, my own lived experience and working close by the industry and all of these things. And I realized I was sitting in the wrong seat. I was raising money for the professors who were not working on the things that I thought were really important to me at that time. And so I knew I had to be the professor and have somebody helping me raise money. And so that was really the impetus for going back to grad school, getting a PhD, which I'd always wanted, but that was the moment. Right. And while I was in grad school, I was so surprised. I went to the information school at Illinois, and people, this was really in the early days of Google. So many people were talking about search engines and like these platforms, like they were the new public library, or that like, everybody was like, this is the early days of just Google it. And I thought, well, this is interesting that the library science people who are responsible for the future of knowledge for humanity are telling everybody to just Google it. Like they're abandoning in some ways these complex, rich, thousands of years old knowledge systems for Google. Like that was a shock to me because I knew that Google was ad tech. So I was thinking about that. And the second thing that happened was Siva Vaidyanathan wrote this incredible book called The Googleization of Everything and Why We Should Worry. And I read that, and that book blew my mind. And he was like, what are we doing? And he was writing about things like the Google Book Digitization Project, where all the libraries were letting Google come in and digitize all their holdings and millions of volumes. And, they were claiming that they were organizing all the world's knowledge. And I was like, well, that's interesting because it's actually mostly European languages only that they're digitizing, and they're calling that the world's knowledge. And I just right off the bat, I was not having that.
Right.
Like that hit wrong. And so I thought, well, let me just write a little bit more. I wrote this dissertation that ended up becoming the book Algorithms of Oppression. It was like the seed of that. But I was kind of looking at the things that Siva didn't talk about, which is how much worse it is for communities of color, for people of color, how much worse everything he was saying about why we should worry about Google, how much worse it will be for Black people. And and in that, I did this kind of first study where I took the US Census, I took all the racial and ethnic categories, and I crossed those with the gender categories that were kind of available to us at the time. And what I found is that over and over, when you did these keyword searches on Black girls, Latina girls, Asian girls, 80% of the first page was pornography and porn sites. Now, you didn't have to add the word sex, you didn't have to add the word porn. Girls of color, women of color were just synonymous with pornography. And that was really the first study that became the anchor for that book, to talk about what is it, first of all, what is search? How can people be misrepresented in these ways? How much money do you need to be able to compete with the porn industry? What is like the political economy of these systems, which is if you have capital on your side and you have policies like loose policy or no policy, no regulation, how does that converge to enact harm? And then the book, of course, once I got into that, is just dozens and dozens of examples of how these kinds of systems are profoundly biased against people of color, and maybe some ideas about what we can do about it.
So for us that are, there's some really smart people on here and some really smart people obviously listening in. But for some of us who are a little more layman term folks, can you kind of define a little bit what algorithmic bias is, just so that we kind of know, as you continue to speak, what exactly is that, and where does that come from? And don't worry about the dog. We're all good.
Okay, you know the dog. Everyone
Yeah.
has heard the dog since COVID. All right. So we have really clear, a lot of people have clear understandings now about that algorithms are basically instructions that you give to a computer so that the computer can make decisions. Let me scream at the dog. And for many decades, the word algorithm was a word that the word algorithm was like jargon that was only available. Did you see me say Ellie Chill?
Yeah.
Okay. And it wasn't really a word that was available to everyday people to understand. It really was about computational instructions and the way you would program a computer to help you arrive at a series of outcomes, right? Maybe working through a decision tree. If these conditions are present, then, compute in this way or in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And for the prevailing logic, really until I think, my era of scholars and the kind of contribution that I made was that these were purely mathematical formulas, and therefore they were value neutral. And one of the ways that I came to understand that, in fact, code and coding projects were not value neutral was I worked as a user experience designer at a tech company in Urbana, Illinois. And I would work with programmers, all of whom would sit around, by the way, in the morning and clown each other's code and just be like, that was trash.
Right.
They were very proud of the elegance and the art of the way they coded, and they liked to razz different guys about how inelegant others were. So, I really had an insider understanding of the way in which programming languages are languages. And it's like teasing someone about the way they speak. I mean, people use language in all kinds of different ways with different kinds of emphasis. It's like, putting the right, emphasis on the syllabus. It's like you got to have if you don't get that right, the emphasis on the syllables, it doesn't make sense. So I really had that kind of like real world experience with programmers and programming language. And I had that while I was in graduate school. And so I was arguing to my computer science professors, my information science professors, well, look, if you are programming, you have your own flair, of course, the things you want to emphasize or bring about,
Mm-hmm.
and your design and your architecture of your systems, because we were designing large scale websites for like 3,000. I know that people will laugh who are watching this when I say like a 3,000 page website. They're going to be like, that girl, that's not a big website. But those size websites. And I would have to go test them. And I would, of course, test them with audiences that they had not previously connected with. So I'd go test these with Black people and brown people and women. And of course, they would take pathways that the programmers didn't expect. And, I would bring the feedback back and they would be like, well, no, that's wrong, because we need a universal design. And universal always reflected what they wanted, quite frankly. It wasn't really universal. So in human computer interaction, we always have this kind of, again, emphasis on universality. And so that really was the backdrop to trying to understanding that there are so many different kinds of biases present in technical systems, both from the designers, from the things they refuse, from the things that they accept. And then, of course, now fast forward into, and of course, the book was really showing the evidence of those biases that were racist and sexist biases. But now, when you think about the kinds of machine learning driven systems, predictive systems that we work with, where they are taking, let's say, structured and unstructured data. So they're taking different kinds of data and they're training models on that data, but that data itself reflects histories and patterns of racism and sexism and inequality in our society. Well, by the time the data scientist or the computer scientist is working with that data, they don't know anything about where that data came from. They're not interested in like how the sociologist arrived at it or the company arrived at it. They're just trying to get as much data. And in many cases, they're trying to get all the free data that they can get. So even the quality, right, of having paid for designing and making good, solid data isn't always there. Sometimes the data set is Reddit. God help us, So in that way, which is like OpenAI, so in these ways, there are many kinds of discrimination or worldviews that are embedded both in the data, but also in the way in which algorithms or AI projects are encoded.
Yeah. And it's always, and that's partly why I asked that question, because in that way, because, I mean, just kind of the average person, we have teenagers, we have, and they're utilizing this stuff and not knowing the impact or how it's biased, that it's not, maybe best for you to be consuming, some of this stuff. And so, I really wanted to kind of share, at least for those listeners, and those who would share this with other people, why the average person, should care about this. Why is it important for you to even, pay attention to what's going on in this realm? Because it actually directly, affects you. These kids are getting all of their information off of TikTok. Like,
Yeah.
it's fact, and it's
I know.
and you talk about algorithms. I mean,
Yeah.
that you're training the algorithms to give you what you want, and if you want, and it's not true most of the time, and it's not, it doesn't have the factual basis, and it doesn't have, and a lot of it's dangerous. And so, I'm glad you broke that down. That's super important, I think, for just the average.
Yeah, I want to say something though about the Gen Zs because they're in particular using TikTok as their new search tool.
Yes.
And of course, this has confounded a lot of people in tech who, let's say, are like older than Gen Z, who don't understand that younger people, because I think of the kinds of work that I've done and other people have done, and many people, in fact, most of the people who have been at the forefront of talking about algorithmic discrimination or harm or the harms of AI are women of color or LGBTQ, men of color, people who have some type of marginalized identity, let's say, have been kind of at the forefront because we're in the communities that are targeted by harmful technologies. And so we see things. One thing, though, that I think is interesting about Gen Z and TikTok is that there is also an impulse in there to not trust a search engine that delivers back a hierarchical ordering of websites. They want to hear from people.
Yes.
And they actually are gravitating more for the human rather than some type of like website intermediary, which is how they relate to search engines. And I heard this from a colleague who works, directly on this and led a study of why, how Gen Z is using the internet. So I think in that way, that what that signals to us is that people do want deeper connection. They want to be connected to what other people have to say more than what a system has to say. Now, of course, you're absolutely right. The corporations who run these companies They don't care about that. They care about extracting our time and attention at all cost. And the way they do that is by making addictive um, uh, projects that capture our attention, that will keep us online 8, 9, 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
And that will also give us constant, dopamine hits so that we'll come back. I mean, that's the social media project, right? But but while something like TikTok is a social media project, it is also a search project. It is also an inquiry project where people are really trying to learn more about and hear firsthand accounts about a product, a celebrity, the downfall of Diddy, like whatever it is. And so, journalists in particular right now are also being forced into these, different kinds of platforms because of what has happened on Twitter. Once Elon took away the verified blue check, and once anybody could buy it, and once all the Nazis came back on that platform and harassed off so many people of color and journalists, people have very few places to go. And that is also one of the things that I really try to talk about in my work is what does it mean when we only have a handful of monopolies that dominate the information and internet landscape? We really are victim to the kinds of things that you're talking about, which is the types of extractive control that they exert over us.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the options that they have, because I always I like Fan Base. I don't know if Isaac Hayes III. I don't know if everyone is familiar, but he has a platform called Fan Base, and it's supposed to give a better ownership to the content creators, and also that it's not being censored or being driven in certain directions. And so it's a good one to check out. But I'm glad you said that, because you did give me some different perspective on how I vision or how I look at the use of TikTok and use of some of those things. But what's crazy, because it is the human to human connection I think people are driving towards, and they want to see people talking and doing this kind of thing. But I saw Oprah Winfrey, because her mouth moving, but it sounded like her voice, but she was talking about, I don't know, I'm just going to throw something out there, like, fixing a car or something like that, right? It was something so totally separate from her image, her product, who she is, but they had her mouth moving at the same, so that you thought it looked like she was talking, but you knew that the subject matter that she was speaking on was not her speaking that. So there's so many crazy little nuances to to how this stuff is being utilized, that that is good and bad, obviously, but you can't just not be paying attention to what's happening.
Yeah. Well, I will say on deep fakes, which is what you're talking about.
Deep fakes, yeah, there you go.
We have legislation that was just introduced yesterday, the SHIELD Act in Congress. We're really crossing our fingers that the SHIELD Act makes it through the process and turns into legislation, because it really will protect the most vulnerable people from deep fakes. I'm I'm on the board of the Cyber Civil Rights Initiative, and the CCRI has passed non-consensual pornography laws, protections from that in 48 of 50 states. And now we're trying to get federal legislation vis-a-vis the SHIELD Act. And my colleague, Marianne Franks, who's a law professor at the University of Miami, has really been leading the way on this work. It's so incredibly important, because one of the things that happens, not just Scarlett Johansson or Oprah, like, who are victims of deep fakes, but everyday people who, again, we know women of color are the most likely to be trolled and attacked and harmed. Black women in particular, specifically, are the most likely to be attacked online. And the use of deep fakes, non-consensual pornography, AI-generated pornography, all of these things are deeply consequential for us. And I say that because we really don't have a legal framework to sue the companies that make the technologies that then are used to attack us. And, women lose their jobs, they lose their livelihoods. In the book, I wrote about a teacher who was a victim of non-consensual pornography and by her ex-husband, and was a decorated teacher and was taken out of the classroom and put on administrative leave. Lots of people who are victimized, and so this is very important. I'm glad you brought up deepfakes, because we do need to be keeping our eye on. And as organizations, we need to be signing on to legislation like the Shield Act and really working hard to put our kind of organizational capacity and knowledge in service of protecting the public. I'm not sure if I lost you all or if I lost everyone.
It looks like we lost the kill.
We
I
lost
think we lost
Akil.
the
Okay.
keel. Oh no, how did that
All right.
happen?
I wasn't sure if he just turned his camera off
Well,
or
no, that's
yeah. Well, maybe I can take some questions in the chat while Akil gets back on with us, if anyone has any.
absolutely. If there are any questions that we have for our wonderful speaker, then go ahead and throw them in the chat and I'll be sure to read them off. Or if you wanted to come off mute, you're more than welcome to do that as well.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Floor is open.
And I think while we let people go ahead and type their questions out, Safiya, if you don't mind telling us, you've told us a little bit about the SHIELD Act, but is there any other legislation that we see coming through that is working to protect people in the space and place of the digital AI and how we've evolved and things like that? Is there any other legislation that's coming to support or protect people, and specifically people of color?
Yeah, I think we should keep our eye on the Algorithmic Accountability Act. That's another important one. I would especially, I think, for people in BDPA, would want to keep an eye on what the Federal Trade Commission is doing and the rulemaking that they're engaged in. Obviously, Chair Lena Khan of the FTC has been a very ardent advocate around equity and fairness and consumer protection around large scale digital companies. She wrote the canonical paper about why Amazon should be broken up as a monopoly, because it has a monopoly hold in the marketplace. So, these are people that I think we should keep our eye on, and we should be tracking and watching the rulemaking. The FTC also had open hearings about 6 months ago or so on data brokers, and that is another thing. Anybody who works around or with data, and especially if you are working on startups or any kinds of small businesses, or you're scaling a company where you're dependent upon third-party data, I think paying close attention to that, because what the idea here behind regulating data brokers is that we all are engaging with so many different technologies. Here we're even using Zoom, and should Zoom be able to take our conversations and take what they learn from us in the chat, and let's say our eye movement and how often we're blinking, and like every biometric data, and sell that to other companies about us? At what point do we have any kind of privacy or protection from the constant buying, selling, and trading of data about us? And regulating data brokers, both here in California, but also at the federal level, is really one of the places where we enact a lot of privacy and protection for ourselves as consumers of these products. So I would definitely keep our eye on that kind of policy too.
I apologize. I had
Hey,
a
welcome back.
I had a power outage. It was just everything went black and the house went down.
Come on,
Anyways,
George.
sorry about that. Thank you for continuing.
Absolutely.
I'm a
No
little sick of what
problem.
you were saying,
And
but
and
for picking up
Amara kept us going.
Of
Yeah.
course. But we do have a question in the chat from Ebony Haynes, and she wrote, any recommendations for closing the digital divide experienced by minorities and poor individuals and developing the next generation of developers who can address these issues?
Yes. I mean, I want to be clear. I think we need to have everybody on the team with all the different kinds of skills that we all have and knowledge and experience. I think that the most valuable thing we can do in training Black computer scientists and programmers is to make them as interdisciplinary as possible. They've got to be reading, these books. There's so many incredible books about, I mean, I have like so many bookcases all over my house that are just books about tech and society. So I think everything about society that programmers can read, and especially Black programmers, they will go to the front of the pack eventually as designers and as the most valuable people to hire, because it's a huge liability. Facebook alone, I think, values the liability of how they get it wrong, both kind of on the programming side, but also in content moderation at $2 billion a year. That's how deep the liability is for them. So times that by all the other companies. And I think that the more that we have programmers who are deeply connected to Black studies, Chicano Latino studies, gender studies, sociology, political science, like who understand law. I know that like that feels like an unfair burden maybe to have to be deeply knowledgeable in these other areas, but I will tell you that with my students, even at UCLA, who come into my classrooms, the computer science students, they've had one class with me, and at the end of the class, they're sobbing because they realize they're about to go to work. They're graduating. They're going to go work for the New York Times or Google or OpenAI or some company, and they don't feel prepared after they've learned the things that I teach them, and they wish they knew more so that they could really be more effective and powerful on the job. So I think those are the skills that we've got to really put, and BDPA is actually in a perfect position because you really have the legacy and loyalty of so many Black scholars who work at the intersection of race and tech. And we try to write our work also so it's available and accessible to students. So I think it's kind of like it's like political education. When if you're from a certain generation or generations, you might have you had the books that you read to pass those classes, and then you have the other books that you read on the yard, with your friends to really be attuned and smart and connected and prepared. So I think those are the kinds of things that we could really do and we should be doing. I say the same things to Black Girls Code, as an organization. It's like, it's not enough just to learn how to code. You got to do that, but you got to, we can't be coding for society and we don't know anything about society. That's really the headline there. We lost our friend again to the power outage, and I'm happy to take any other questions.
Oh my goodness.
I know.
We're living in Georgia. We have all
know.
sorts of different changes in our climate, and
Yeah.
clearly the whatever weather's coming our way has gotten to Akil first.
Actually, let me say something about that then. So one of the things that we know about generative AI, and this is, the work of my friend and colleague, Timnit Jabru, who I'm sure many of you know was the head of ethical AI at Google and was fired for the paper that she and her colleagues wrote about generative AI holding so much racist bias and just being incredibly harmful, and really admonishing the company not to release its own generative AI product into the marketplace. I guess she was proven right, because in fact, when Bard and Gemini, came onto the scene with a lot of problems, she was really kind of proven right. All right. So having said that, and Akil, we're talking about, you're dealing with kind of these climate issues and like power outages and things that we know are actually connected to climate change, like it's undeniable. one of the things that Tanit says all the time about generative AI, and in this stochastic parrots paper that she and Emily Bender and their colleagues wrote, what kind of a really important buried gem was the environmental cost of generative AI. And what they estimate, the researchers estimate, is that every time you use a generative AI prompt, so you go into ChatGPT, one question, one prompt is the equivalent of pouring one glass of water just on the ground. So that's how much water we're consuming, every prompt. And I think that as we continue to build our societies that are so heavily dependent upon incredible energy consumption, and we're really not attuned to this in the United States. It's shameful the way in which we waste energy and build projects that are so energy dependent, and we don't understand the repercussions of that, the flooding, the fires, the catastrophes that are happening around the world, which, by the way, are mostly happening in Black and Brown communities outside of the United States. We must have more of a, I don't know, now I'm going to sound, I'm again dating myself, but like a diasporic, Pan-Africanist way of thinking about Black people and our connections to technology around the world. That goes from like coltan mining in the Congo to manufacture and production, and where we are, in fact, used as the most disposable labor for the most dangerous kinds of cleaning of training data, the Kenyan data cleaners who clean data for OpenAI. We know this, all right, in this organization. To the bypassing of us for white collar software jobs, upper management kinds of jobs. We're completely excluded from upper management for the most part in software. And then where e-waste goes, which we know it gets put on huge barges and it goes to places like Ghana and destroys the environment in, all over the continent. So we need to reimagine what these systems are, what they will be. We have incredible capacity and genius, I believe, as Black people, to hold all these complexities simultaneously and then design and make in response. And so one of the things I say to my students is I say, look, they're like, Dr. Noble, check out my new app that I made. And I'm like, I'm not interested. What I want to hear about is, can we bury this phone when we're done and grow trees from it? Can we run these devices off of solar or wind or renewable energy? Are we making renewable energy? Are we attuned? Or are we just in the very narrow kind of white supremacist paradigm that Silicon Valley gives to us? And if we look at their leaders and we look at many of the people and their eugenicist projects and desires that are hidden in plain sight, then we would actually make something completely different, and we would train our community to think so much more expansively and powerfully. And so that, I think, is the incredible opportunity that we have, that BDPA in particular has, that no other organization could do.
I like that, in the sense that I always talk about, when we talk about the future, I always talk about we are so great as a people of creating or designing the next Venus and Serena, the next LeBron James, the next, we'd be putting that same kind of into the next, researchers or librarians and data scientists and all of these positions that you're talking about that could, come together and actually make a difference in what the future looks like. Because if we're not at the table, there has to be someone that you pass your baton to, right? And so we absolutely have to be finding them, or look for them in elementary school, and look for them in in science camps and other areas that science fairs and other areas that I think that they're hiding, and pull them out and support them and fund them and sponsor them and do all the things that we should be doing in order to create the pass off to the next next group. I want to apologize to everybody. Obviously, the internet and power is not trying to let me be great today, but
It's so great.
we're going to be great anyways. Ready to close. I know that your time is our time is up here with BDPA, but I did want to ask a couple little final questions. One was, what do you have coming up next? What is kind of on your short horizon we should be paying attention to? And I'm gonna ask you the second question also, so you can tackle them both.
Okay.
The other thing was, what are some actionable steps for the people listening, and what can we do to be more included or active in this mission, this movement, from wherever position we sit, whether it's as a user, as a developer, as a researcher, as a we have on the line as well, and we have other folks on. So I'd love for you to kind of give us a sense of what we should be, what you got going on coming up down the road, and then also what what could people
Yeah, I got the questions. So I am hopefully going on sabbatical soon because I have never had a sabbatical in academia, which is a problem unto itself. But I am going to I'm going to be working on a series of books for kids about the kinds of things we've talked about today, because I really believe that we need to enter these conversations earlier and earlier. And of course, because we want our kids to be super savvy when they're engaging with digital technology. So hopefully we'll do some translating of this work to younger audiences. And, I think that we're always interested at the Center on Race and Digital Justice in being in collaboration in the ecosystem with lots of other organizations. So I really invite the relationship with BDPA. I think that, as individuals, we think we don't have a lot of power, but your decision makers on your job, your decision makers in your own households, having the information really allows you to ask critical and hard questions. And I'll tell you, one of the things that I do as a parent is challenge my kids to think harder and smarter about these kinds of things. And I know many of you in the organization also work with kids. And so this is, really great opportunity for us to I think we're like on the digital forefront. Our community always has been. I know we get narrated as behind, but I want to encourage us to resist that, because our kids are actually always at the forefront in culture and in making and in digital technology use. So there's lots of things. I don't think there's one answer, but I think doing the reading, there's lots of new films out, and there's just staying curious in this space and making new narratives about our engagements as communities with these technologies and with these conversations is really that again is one of our superpowers. And I'm really grateful to have been in conversation with you today and to get to share a little bit and to get to know you. And I hope that this is just the beginning and not the end.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love it. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for BDPA for the platform and the opportunity to share this information, and our friend, Dr. Safiya Noble. And we'll see you next time. Devin, you can close us out. You ready, buddy?
Thank you.
Absolutely. No, thank you everyone for joining today. Thank you, Dr. Noble, for all of your insights and your perspective. This was great. Akil, Amar, thank you as always. Vanguard, for all that you all do to advance workforce development, apprenticeships, and just expanding the technology skill set across our communities. This is very important work that you're doing, and glad to be partnering with you through this effort. So thank you all. I did drop a few links in the chat. One is for the Tech and Career Talks. You can go find this recording afterwards, share it with a friend, go back and watch it yourself, digest it, and let's get to work. Then the second one is to register for the conference. So that's bdpa.org/tech in career talks for those talks, or you can go to YouTube, search National BDPA, you'll find it there. And then conference.bdpa.org, everything you need to know about BDPA Con 24. This has been great. If you're watching on YouTube, like, share, subscribe, click the link down low. What all the influencers say, yeah, do that. Click the bell so you know when we're posting. But be safe, stay blessed. Enjoy your Memorial Day weekend. We'll see you again soon.
Right on.